Public Meetings Act, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and forwarding to the officially designated newspapers that this meeting would take place at Town Hall at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, March 5th, 2019. Please stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Ms. Bursky?
Here.
Mr. Levy?
Here.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Here.
Ms. Purvis?
Here.
Mary Phil Eglo?
Here. Before we consider approving the agenda, I would like to add Resolution 19-080 to the consent agenda. Resolution 19-080 proposes the appointment of, what's his name? Kevin Wenzel to the Zoning Board of Adjustment as alternate number 2 with a term expiration of December 31st, 2020. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as revised to include 19-080 to the consent agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? May I have a motion to approve the December 4th, 2018 Township Committee minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? May I have a motion to approve the December 4th, 2018 Special Township Committee minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Reports. Okay. First, I would like to welcome everyone tonight, and I would like to say thank you and a big compliment to DPW, which did an outstanding job clearing the township roads Sunday night into Monday. I was also asked to share that March is National Colon Cancer Awareness Month, and I left a fact sheet on the table. Everyone might want to just take a look at that or grab a copy, share it with your family and friends. I want to report that the PACS committee had its first meeting where we identified several target areas that cause the most distress and congestion in and around downtown. This group will continue to look at these top targets and categorize them into 3 buckets. First would be quick hits, which would be paint and signage, low cost with little or no construction. The number 2 bucket would be moderate changes. These may require more time and more funding. The 3rd bucket would be long-term changes, requiring more capital investment, time, and possible disruption. An example of a quick hit is we will be looking to create a designated right turn lane on Millburn Avenue onto Spring Street. Our engineering department will provide the measurements to allow for this. Some vehicles, in addition to the school buses, are currently using this as a turn lane, and this will serve to reduce potential conflict and confusion here, as well as stacking of cars at that corner. This can easily be accomplished with paint and signs. Moderate change would be, for example, looking at the large bump out in front of Bubble Tea across from Blue Mercury. This bump out extends circulation, reduces stacking of cars on Millburn Avenue, and very importantly, allow for vehicles to have more area to yield for emergency vehicles coming down Millburn Avenue. An example of combining, say, a moderate and a long-term fix, we discussed circulation around Town Hall. What can and should be done to remove the conflict of the current situation at Town Hall and Dunkin' Donut parking lot? Currently, cars exit directly over the crosswalk, and there's a very tight entrance and exit together. This situation would require completing the unfinished access around Town Hall Plaza, so we are having that being studied. A long-term discussion example would involve the Millburn train station, circulation, safety issues, and creating pickup and drop-off zones. We will most likely need to engage a professional engineer firm with this specific expertise. We'll also investigate New Jersey transit grants. This may also require the service of a professional grant writer for the best outcome in being awarded these grants. We discussed a short-term possibility of reflected bollards like we currently have at the Short Hills train station. These have been successful in identifying that pedestrians are expected to cross specifically at this crosswalk, and possibly putting those as an experiment, we don't know, on the most furthest left lane on Essex Street. In the meantime, all property owners will be sent a copy of the ordinance that was passed in December that restricts deliveries to designated loading zones. We hope for compliance, yet we realize follow-up PD enforcement may be required. Also, we will ask the police officers to step up enforcement with double parking. And again, we ask everyone to slow down, full stop at stop signs, use your cell phone flashlight apps, and do not walk and drive distracted by texting. So that's where PAC stands right now for our initial first meeting. We got a lot done, we talked about a lot, and we'll be meeting again on Thursday evening. And we'll see what measurements we get and what more we can do to assess what's happening downtown. And that's my report. Committeewoman Burstein?
I was at the library board of directors. We have on April 1st a film book review. I don't know what they've chosen, but it's going to be a young adult crossover book at 7 p.m. And on May 5th, Vivian Gordon is going to discuss Renaissance portraits, and that coincides with an exhibit at the Frick. The library book sale will be in June of 2019, and donations of books will begin in May.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Lieberberg?
MMAC is going to be holding an evening of conversation, a dialogue to strengthen community. That will be held on March 26th at the library. There'll be a performance. The whole families are invited by the mental health players to address important issues facing families, and a community discussion will be guided by a panel of experts. All issues including anxiety, depression, and other mental health struggles, bullying and intolerance, substance abuse. Once again, that'll be March 26th. Doors open at 6:30. Performance starts at 7, Millburn Public Library. I'm also happy to report that the CEDA committee, the formerly CEDAC committee, met on February 21st and discussed a first community arts project to celebrate our Milltown past and our vibrant present, and we would invite all individuals as well as anybody that works in the town for this inclusive community engagement project, loosely titled Mill Wheels Rolling into Millburn, and will provide interested individuals, groups, and organizations with the opportunity to decorate a mill wheel. I guess we should have probably rolled it in.
Yeah, we should have rolled the mill wheel in.
There will be a kickoff event on Sunday, April 7th at Taylor Park. To learn more about Mill Wheels Rolling into Millburn, there'll be an active painting demonstration by artist Dan Fenelon, who did the mural in the Wyoming school. There'll be opportunities for children to participate. There'll be food, some drinks. So bring your creative ideas. There will be a community-wide mill wheel that will be worked on that day as well. And come celebrate spring and join us for this kickoff event. Sunday, April 7th at 2 o'clock. You will be seeing posters around town very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Committeewoman Frupas?
I have no reports.
Committeeman Levy?
No report.
Township Administrator?
Yeah, just 3 brief reports. I'm happy to report that from back in March of last year, we had a significant snowstorm which qualified for FEMA money. We've submitted our paperwork and received confirmation that we will receive 75% of the $591,000 that we expended during that storm and for the subsequent cleanup of the debris, which is good news. No timing on the actual reimbursement, but confirmation that money is available and the township will receive it. Just a quick update on the Sustainable Essex Alliance, which is the energy aggregation program that has been spoken about numerous times in front of the committee and the public regarding what is a community aggregation program with several Essex County towns. The RFP is out. It will be received by Maplewood, who is the lead agency on this, on April 2nd. We will be putting information on the website by the end of the week for residents to view and understand what that is and that process. This is something that we'll need to produce if the township is going to be a part of it, produce a savings to our residents through their current energy provider, And also, the bonus to this is that no matter what company wins on that bid, it'll have a green or clean component to it. Lastly, Chatham Road and the Short Hills train station. We have some conceptual improvements for that area. We're inviting the public to the library on March 14th at 7 p.m. To discuss and take a look and offer up your comments. There will also be another meeting on April 24th. March 24th. Sorry, March 24th, which is a Sunday at 3 p.m. at the library as well.
Alex, will we be having those diagrams or anything on the website for people to see, or not until they come to the library that night?
No, we will have them up there. We're currently working on, we have a CAD or two-dimensional. We're looking to have some sort of rendering up there as well, so that people
On the
can
website?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to have a visual perspective of it, but that's obviously what we will be discussing also at the library on those nights.
Right, but you can get a quick peek beforehand. Kit?
Yes, a quick report. I'm pleased to be able to advise that in the case of Kurzweil versus Millburn Township and the Board of Adjustment, following the return date of the order show cause and our argument, the judge has signed the order, which effectively removes the township from the case. No need to file further pleadings or to participate further. So it's essentially equivalent to a dismissal from that case.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, public comment. When invited to speak, please come, George, our county representative, is not here, so not just skipping over George, he wasn't able to come tonight. When invited to speak, please come to the lectern, clearly state your name and address, speak into the podium microphone so that your comments can be understood by all and properly recorded. Whenever an audience or committee member reads from a prepared statement, please give or email a copy to the Township Clerk's office at cgotti@millburntwp.org. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes. Okay, we have a nice, is that what I leave out? Oh, I'm so sorry. We have a presentation tonight. Sorry, public comments will have to wait because you might want to comment after this presenter. So Tara, would you introduce our presenter?
Joe, do you want to just come up? So Miriam and Salerno asked Joe Getz to come present to the Township Committee. I'm going to just let you go for it.
That's
You
it?
can introduce. That's
okay.
it.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to speak with you. My name is Joe Getz. I'm founding principal of a firm called the JGSC Group out of Merchantville, New Jersey. We are downtown revitalization specialists and help communities to stimulate economic growth. As Tara mentioned, we were presenting at the New Jersey chapter of the American Planning Association, and following that, I received a phone call asking me for additional information about the services we can provide, which led to me being asked to come here tonight and speak to you. As I mentioned, we focus on economic growth specifically for communities and more specifically for downtowns, although we have a great deal of experience in the private sector too, with shopping malls and retail centers and things like that. We focus on consumer spending because consumer spending in the U.S. drives about 60 to 70% of all economic spending. I put a cartoon in here because for about 50 years we thought that it was easy to decide how to drive our downtown. Someone showed up, wanted to build a department store, someone showed up, wanted to build some apartments, and it was generally pretty easy to manage. But today's economy works a little more like this. A guy walks into a bar, and as he's climbing up onto the bar stool, the bartender sets a drink in front of him, and he looks at the drink and he says, "What's this?" And the bartender said, I thought you'd like this. And he said, "How do you know what I'd like? Because you didn't ask me." And that's the way today's economy basically works in downtowns. So we all remember the Great Recession of 2007. And what happened during that 10-year period that followed that is that everything that we knew about downtown, everything we knew about retail basically changed. The three big factors that we want to just briefly touch on is changes in consumers, changes in retail preferences, and changes in technology. What's happened to our consumers is downtowns and primarily retail was all focused on baby boomers, people like myself, people who were born as late as 1964, and then some period earlier than that. If you look at the chart on the left, what you can see is this is the amount of population of each of the three groups that we deal with today. Baby boomers have about 74 million, and we're dying off, literally. Gen X has about 66 million, and millennials, the thing we're all talking about today, has even more. They have over 75 million people. But when you attach the income status to that, what we see is the people with the most money is the Gen X, and the people with the least amount of money is millennials. So what happens to our economies and our communities is as baby boomers stop spending, and the peak retail spending for consumers is about 52. The youngest baby boomer today is 55. So that audience is beginning to shift more money into medical expenses and less money into retail. And what's happening is our economy is suffering from a drag where we don't have as many millennials as we had boomers. We don't have as many Gen Xers as we did boomers. We have just as many millennials, but they don't have anywhere near the same amount of money, and many of them are saddled with college debt. What also happened to us is technology changed. In 2008, we didn't have virtually any of the things that we deal with today. Online shopping now accounts for about 9% of all retail spending in our country. Third-party delivery services, people like Grubhub. The fact is that 63% of all restaurant sales now occur outside of restaurants. 63%. They're deliveries, they're takeouts, they're food trucks, they're things like that. They're catering and things like that. And of course, because we're wireless now, that's a Starbucks. There's about 14,000 of them in the U.S., and they're quickly replacing our offices as the meeting place for people who want to get things done. And one thing that Millburn has in the downtown is a fair amount of office space. So I'm wondering how long that technology is going to go on before it begins to impact. And of course, our local newspapers and all the things that changed with Facebook. The third thing that happened was, this is my favorite restaurant in the whole world. It's called Sausage, Bacon, and Beer. It's in Chicago. But what's happened is retail preferences have changed during the same period. In the past 3 years, Macy's has closed 118 stores throughout the country, and Amazon has grown by $71 billion in retail sales. Gap announced this week that they're going to close 230 retail stores, and they're going to take all of that business online, and they don't expect to have any loss in revenue. And then, of course, Zipcar, Lyft, Uber, people like that are replacing how we buy cars, where we park cars. It's changing our downtown demand for parking. It's changing demand for auto dealers. It's changing demand for auto parts and supplies and things like that. So those are the three big factors that have impacted communities. What we do to help is try and overcome the fact that organic growth just isn't working anymore. As I said before in that cartoon anecdote, it used to be there was an assumption that everybody was coming downtown and the community's job was to manage that growth and to control where those people were going. But the fact of the matter is that that's not how it's working now. And now we need to try and work actively to bring the economic growth to the downtown. Our firm, we have about 32 years experience, and we've worked on over 200 projects in 19 states. In this area, I'm sorry, it's mouse type there, but I ran a map, a 25-mile map from the middle of Millburn, and these are the places we've worked with in this area. And it's at Bergenfield and Bloomfield and Carteret, a couple places in Elizabeth, 26 different neighborhoods in New York City, Orange, South Orange, West Orange, Maplewood, Springfield. So we know the area and we understand the dynamics of what's going on in the economy here. our proposal to you is that we can help jumpstart economic growth and activity in your downtown area. And we do that by going out and looking at market share. The $100 bill is in a typical town. We go in and people think that everyone who lives here spends all their money here. And in reality, everybody who lives here spends about 10% of their money here. So what we do is help communities to understand their market, to find out who's coming to the downtown and who's missing, understand what they want and need, and we look for untapped potential that can be captured to help grow the local economy. And we do this through not only through analysis and research, but also by creating a realistic strategic plan that everyone can follow step by step, month by month, and then we assist communities in implementing it. The first part of this is to engage the community and to talk to everyone, residents, people who work here but live elsewhere, people who visit here, commuters, property owners, business owners, because they're the people who can give us the insight about what's going on in your community. In the first step of the community outreach, the process is there on the top, but what we would do is reach out to those stakeholders and property owners and business owners to help us understand what's the status of businesses in a community. We have found in other towns that we've worked in that in some cases, 3 out of 4 small businesses are functionally bankrupt, which means that they open their doors every day and they go to work every day, but they're not really making any money and they don't have any opportunity to create economic growth or hire new people as employees or those sorts of things. So we go through this first part of the process to understand where businesses are finding their customers, where the property owners think that the market looks like. For an example, there's a strip on Millburn Avenue where there's about 4 or 5 vacancies in a row. And I saw it when I was walking up and down there today. And sometimes that's a case of a property owner who has an unrealistic view of what the market looks like. Sometimes it's the case of a property owner who's just outgunned by all the changes that are taking place today and can use some assistance from the community. So we do the interviews. We also do the survey, and it's very hard to see here. But if you would focus right in here, these are actually custom designed for each community. They're online surveys where we have to have 405 responses. I've looked at the kinds of responses you've gotten to surveys, and typically we would get 1,200, 1,500, 2,000 responses. And what they do is they tell us what they like and what they don't like, and how often do they come to downtown, and what would make them come here more often. What kind of stores would they like to see? And that one that I circled for you is one where we actually ask them about their spending. How much do they spend here? How much do they spend elsewhere? So that we can actually measure what the potential is to grow, and we use that later on. We also do analysis with syndicated data to try and understand what the trade area looks like, because no consumer looks at your community on the same geopolitical boundaries that you look at it. We all talk about Millburn or my hometown, but consumers generally don't know where the boundaries are, and they just go where they want to have a nice restaurant or where they want to eat. So we use this information to create a strategic plan. These are just an example of a couple that we work. Strategic plans help us identify specific opportunities. An example of a specific opportunity would be there's high demand for restaurants. There's not enough restaurants in the area. Given the physical layout of your downtown, you may have an opportunity to create a restaurant row. And then we identify targeted projects, which means we want to create a restaurant row in this area. Where are the stores and where are the buildings that we can actually start to work with to attract restaurants and those kinds of things. There's a saying in our business, which is once you know what, it's easy to know who. So towns all sit around and they say, well, we have empty downtown stores and we want to fill them, and wouldn't it be a good idea if we knew what would go there and who would go there? Through that process I just described, we would know what goes there, whether that is, again, whether it's restaurants or whether it's professional services or whatever it might be. and we actually produce a targeted prospect list so that if we're looking for restaurants, we actually will go out and look for restaurants who have good credit scores, who have space requirements that match what you have available in your community, that have been in business for a sufficient number of years, 3 to 5 years, so that we know that they're lower risk. And it doesn't matter in those cases that are up there. That list includes restaurants, it includes delis, it includes hotels, it includes developers. So if the answer is that what we need is to do more development downtown to create new residential opportunities for people to live in, because residents, feet on the street is what drives the economy. And the point is that we know how to produce those lists and target those people. And then we create marketing materials that allow us to go out and talk to those people that we've identified. In this case, sorry, act surprised when you see that one. On the top row, it's a program we did for Vineland. On the left, in the middle, is the North Shore of Long Island. On the right is Little Arthur Avenue, Little Italy in the Bronx. We did Long Island City in the middle when JetBlue decided to make it their world headquarters. We might be going back now that Amazon's not going to go there. The other one in the middle is Fairfax, Virginia. And in the bottom, that's Beach 116th Street in New York City, which we were called in to help restart the economies after Hurricane Sandy. So Red Hook and some places like that. We also assist communities with implementation, and in this example, this is the heart of Brooklyn. It was a situation where they had high-income residents and about 11 million visitors a year coming to the area, but consumer demand exceeded the available retail supply by over $2 billion a year, and they had a 19% vacancy rate. We did exactly the same process I just explained to you, and over a period of 6 months, meeting with owners and enrolling them into the process and marketing it and conducting property tours, we were able to recruit 9 stores there in a 6-month period. That's the process, and that's an overview of what it is that we do, and I would be happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. So I do have a few questions.
Okay.
So of course, we all want a vibrant and healthy downtown. It's very
Yes.
important. Who usually pays for your services? A SID, the BID, the DMDA, or the municipality? Or city in that case?
Any of them. We have worked with a number of improvement districts throughout New Jersey. We were hired by the city of New York and assigned to neighborhoods. We worked for Main Street, New Jersey when that was in existence, and they paid for it. Communities pay for it, so it's any variation depending upon what works for that community.
Okay. What would be the scope of your survey? The footprint of just the downtown? We have also Upper Millburn Avenue.
Right. So the surveys are done online. They're supported through digital advertising and through signage, if that's permitted in your town, like a 3-foot by 2-foot sign that says, tell us what you want, millburnsurvey.com or .org or something like that. The reason that we use digital advertising is because our goal is to speak with people who are not in your downtown specifically, or people who are just driving through. We'll alert businesses, major employers in the community. At the train stations, we typically get permission from New Jersey Transit to go on the platform and distribute coupons to people in the morning rush or the PM rush. So the scope of it is, if you live here, if you work here, if you dine here, shop here, drive down Millburn Avenue or any of the other major intersections or take the trains, we want to talk to you.
Okay. Are you in essence acting as a broker to bring potential tenants in?
No. We are not brokers. We do not do real estate brokerage. We find that most property owners have their own way of doing it. In many cases, some of the more established property owners like to do it on their own. Others like to engage a broker. It doesn't matter to us how we do it. Our purpose is not to necessarily lease their specific property. Our purpose is to attract the type of retail businesses and other businesses to your community that will help make it more vibrant and to act as a conduit for those property owners. We have the skill sets and the resources to understand who those people are, to find them, to reach out to them. Let me see if I can go back there. And to put together, in that case, a list of who those people are. We also work with the property owners themselves to make sure that their buildings are ready to be leased and not being used as a warehouse or in need of improvements and those things. We work with property owners to make sure that they understand what's an appropriate rent rate in the area. They make that decision, but we want to give them that information and help them. So our only source of revenue from this process is whatever we get paid by the people who hire us.
Okay, well, so the big question, we no longer have a DMDA that's funded.
I understand that.
So this would be being paid for by our municipality if we go this route, which is our taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us about your fees.
So we propose that you do this in 3 steps.
Mm-hmm.
The first step is the community engagement and outreach. That includes all the interviews and the surveys, and we come back to you and say, here are your challenges, here are the opportunities we're hearing about, and we recommend to you whether or not you should go forward. There have been cases where we've recommended to a community that, you have a crime perception problem. You need to solve that before you solve this kind of thing. That fee is $17,000 all in. That includes the cost of all the advertising, the cost of all the signage, the cost of programming the website, buying the domain name, everything. There is no additional charge for that kind of work. At the end of that first process, if you say, okay, yeah, we think it shows an opportunity here and we want to move forward with the strategic planning, that generally is between $30,000 and $40,000, and that's for the purpose of developing a strategic plan that gives specific, as I mentioned before, specific recommendations, identifies specific opportunities, and talks about what those topics are. And then the third phase is if you want us to help you implement with it. In some cases, clients have said, nope, we'll take it from here. We're perfectly happy to give them the information, give them our strategies, and they can implement it as they see fit. In cases where clients do retain us to help them implement it, our services take whatever form you need them to take. If you want us to help arrange broker tours or help arrange, property tours, we can do those things. If you want us to just handle the mailing and the marketing, we can do that as well. We charge $180 an hour to provide that service. Typically, a client, it requires about 10 or 15 hours a month. It's not, we don't move in and set up a tent. It's not that sort of thing. That implementation phase, cancel it with 30 days notice. If you're not happy, if you change direction, if you decide you want to do something different, that's fine. We're just here to help try and implement that plan. The only hidden cost, if you would, is if we're mailing things to people, we ask you to pay to print it and ask you to pay to mail it, the postage. But as part of the strategic plan, we create the first set of all those materials. So we'll produce 500 postcards and 500 flyers and, the prospect list and those things. It's if you later decide you want to print it differently or print more of them.
So I'll open up to the other members, but last question. So when someone comes to open up a new store in town, they most likely have to go before the planning board.
Right.
Do you help with this process?
Yes.
That's
We're
step number 2?
It could be 2 or 3. It could be saying, you have a problem with your with a disconnect between the planning board and the merchants. And in Roselle as an example, Roselle's a client of ours right now. What we're doing is working with the planning board in advance to find out what is it that's acceptable to you so that we can then go out and market and recruit those types, in their case it's development, and go recruit that type of development and have a process and know that we can say to a developer, if you do these things, they want to talk to you, and then bring them in. But again, it's whatever the circumstance requires.
Okay. Any other township committee members have questions?
Yeah, I do. Step 2, the strategic action plan, does that
Yes.
include targeted lists of actual retailers that you believe, based on your survey and analyses, should be the focus of landowners?
If that is supported by the survey and it's supported by the economic analysis, then the answer is yes. In fact, you recently updated your master plan, and they talk specifically in there about doing an economic visioning plan. That is interchangeable with a strategic plan that we're proposing.
Right, so for instance, on your, I don't know if this is placed out for the benefit of the public, but in your letter
Yeah.
to us with the details of your costs, you write that categories would be presented in step 2, including retail, dining, entertainment, for instance, of types of establishments that your analysis shows perhaps should be included in downtown, right?
Yes.
So let's take retail. Would you identify different retailers that you think Gap, perhaps not a good example, Victoria's Secret,
Right.
not a good example either, given its announcement 2 days ago as
Yeah.
well, too. But would you identify certain retailers that you think, given your analysis and the location of 2 malls in the area, would be good candidates for
Right.
landowners?
There's a couple points I should make. One is it's generally not a good idea for a downtown to compete with a mall.
Understood.
And vice versa.
That's
So
why I added that.
typically, the types of businesses that you can expect us to suggest to you are not large national retailers like a Toys R Us or any of those kinds of things, because your downtown just doesn't have the footprint that's going to support that. Let's assume that we identify 4 specific properties, and that the owners of those properties say, yes, we want help, we want support in recruiting new people. We will look for retailers within the categories that have been shown here, and oftentimes those categories are 10, 12, 14 different kinds of businesses, everything from entertainment to dining to shopping to professional services. And we will build a list, typically no less than 100 retailers in those categories. And that list, we will include only those retailers who have A or B credit scores, who have been in business for 3 to 5 years, because we don't like the turnover that comes with new businesses. There's a time and place for that, but not in the beginning. We will provide for you name, address, all the contact information, email addresses, assumed space requirements. So if the 4 properties that we have are each 2,000 square feet in size, there's no reason for me to bring a retailer who needs 10,000 or 15,000 square feet. We'll match it as closely as we can. And I should make the point that we don't do any of this without your acceptance of our recommendations and your approval. So if we come back and we say, we think what you need is a petting zoo, and you go, nah, we don't want a petting zoo, then that's not going to go on the list. We're going to
But
look
this
at
is all
things.
part of step 2, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All inclusive.
So let's say you're engaged, you complete step 1, the township engages you to complete step 2, and it includes these specific retailers, specific restaurants, specific other categories, names, addresses, contact persons.
Yes.
Those lists are presented to the township committee and then ultimately would be presented to landlords, the owners whose storefronts are vacant. And then they would
Yeah.
take a look at those lists, and some may contact the same people, some may not. And they have at it with whatever it is they want. If
Well-
they want extra services, so for instance, if they say to you, please reach out and contact, pick a bookstore or something like that, then that falls into step 3, which is $180 an hour, right?
No, it actually is step 2, because as we talked about with the marketing materials, what I wouldn't suggest is that you just give your prospect list to your property owners. You can do that if you want, it's your list. But what we have found is that those start to become exactly the kinds of quagmires that you're talking about. So we think it's best if the community itself does the outreach and does the marketing. What we want to do is reach out to those businesses and tell them the story. Millburn has X millions or X billions of dollars in unmet consumer demand. Our average household income is this. Our rents are this. We have access to these kinds of highways and those sorts of things. And we want to alert those people, but when they respond, then either we or the community acts as the conduit who goes to the broker or goes to the property owner and says, I have 3 restaurants that are interested in your type of property.
Okay, this is my point. So
Yes, sir.
we, the pronoun, that means you, your company, right? You're the one that does that reach out. We is not the township committee, we're not reaching out to.
Well, because you don't have a downtown management
Right.
organization at the moment. In most cases, we, JGSC Group, is not
I
retained
know,
to do
that's why I was
that.
specific on that.
Yeah, I'm
We
sorry.
is you,
At the moment, we is me.
okay?
Yes.
We is you, and we is, that's phase 3, so that's the 180 an hour, right?
No. The outreach, the mailings and all, that's all included in the initial price. The 180 comes after the fact where you say, we have all these empty properties and we're getting interest and somebody needs to arrange a tour bus to go up and down the street on a Saturday morning and carry prospective brokers, retail, those sorts of things. What phase 2 includes: analysis, strategies, identification of prospects, creation and mailing of marketing materials. That's what phase 2 includes.
Okay,
So we haven't gotten to we yet.
Staying in phase 2.
Yes,
the,
sir.
The we reaching out, that pronoun, you reaching out. Let's say you identify nail salons, okay? And
I hope
I
not.
know probably,
Okay, no,
maybe
that's
not
right.
a good example, but
No,
nail salons.
I
Let's-
think you have plenty, but okay.
Yeah, we probably do.
Yeah.
So you reach out through your contacts to, I don't know, 4 of them: Sam's Nails, Alex's Nails, Tara's
Right.
Nails, whatever. They all come back and they are interested in, and you think that there may be some good match given the square foot and the prices they're willing to pay and all other kinds of or perhaps geopolitical factors.
Right.
And then you present those findings to, not a bid, because we don't have one, but
Right.
to the township committee. And the township committee is supposed to do what? Pick a landlord to
No,
take that
actually-
information to?
A more realistic position at that point would be if we've stirred up the beehive and now there's activity and interest, then we should already know who the property owners are that are willing to participate in this program. And that is when we say to them, we have 4 nail salons that have, these kinds of opportunities. And we just send that information. It's an email to the property owners. Now, here's what happens in
I know,
reality.
and then multiple,
At
restaurants
that
is
point,
easier.
but
Let's say
we've put it
multiple
in a
landlords
funnel.
come back and say, yeah, I'm interested in speaking to this restaurant. And then somebody has to coordinate the connection between those putative restaurants and the potential landlords, right?
Yes, and that's where it then comes to, that's the property owner and/or their broker. And that was the point I made to you earlier, is that we're not in that, we don't want to be involved in that brokerage role, because then we're accused of favoring this guy or trying to cut out brokers' commissions, and that's not what we do.
And similarly, I don't think,
Yes.
I'll speak for me, I don't think the township committee should be in the business of selecting which landlords are perhaps preferred
Right.
for some of this information, or which landlords, if any, get the collective of the information, and then we say, go at it. Here's the report from the consultant.
So-
Go at it, contact all these people, good luck.
Well, again, to clarify it, the contact you want to control, whether that's done through us, whether it's done through a bid, whether you have an economic development director, however you do that, you want to control the contact, because here's what happened. When we did it the other way and we gave this information to everybody, and the brokers ran off and they were aggressive, and God love them, they were assertive, and they got somebody and they took them to Chatham. And they took them to Summit, because we gave them all the contact information. We told them what the market looked like, not just the town. I think it's in your best interest if you control the dissemination of marketing materials and promote your community in general. And then when you get down to a specific prospect and or a specific property, let the market work. Let the brokers do what they're supposed to do. Let the property owners do what they're supposed
Yeah,
to
but I
do.
don't know, my problem is I don't know how to do that. I can receive the information, but then I personally,
Right.
speak for myself, do not know how to disseminate it in a fair and equitable manner to all of the landlords and all the property owners who may want this information,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of homogeneous spaces, and there may be competition.
There-
for some of that
and there may be. All we're trying to do is help that property owner do things that he may not have the resources, he or she may not have the resources to do on their own. If you have 7 property owners who have signed up and collectively have 12 properties, and we have 4 people who say, I'm looking for between 1,500 and 2,500 square feet, that should be your decision criteria. We have
That
these
puts-
properties that fit the space, we'll send the information to them. And to be candid, sir,
That puts us in a position of making those decisions, which is what I would want to try to avoid. Because that puts us right in the middle of commerce, okay? The commerce of the analyses
Right.
that you have done and the linkage between putative retailers and existing landlords, and I don't think we should be in the business of making decisions. I'm not against this
I understand.
generally. Help
and
me at least. Try to figure out a way that we can do this without anyone,
well,
without any appearance.
Well,
of
we
favoritism.
can. We can. You can require a property owner to take some overt action to say they want in on this process. I don't think that that's unreasonable or unfair. And typically we do that by sending letters to them, hopefully on your letterhead saying we're doing this process. And we'll ask them, in the case of, I was showing you of Brooklyn, they actually had to sign a letter back to, in that case, I think it was an improvement district. They had to sign the letter back and said, I'm willing to ask a reasonable rent. We didn't ask how much. Just, I'm willing to ask a reasonable rent. I'm willing to make my property ready to be leased, and I'm willing to make it reasonably available for showings, and that's all we asked. And those who did that ended up leasing places, and those who didn't end up leasing them. I don't care how you structure it. I will tell you from experience that if you want to throw it open to everybody and their brother, you probably won't get the same results, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing if you want to avoid putting yourselves in a position where you're acting like, favoritism to one person or another.
All right, thanks.
Where is that in the process?
Sorry?
Interacting with the property owners, where is that in your process?
It's in all three phases. In the first phase, we will reach out to them to gauge opportunities, challenges, what's on their mind, what do they want to do. Sometimes through that process, what you learn is this property owner says, I'm old, I'm tired, and I've had it, and I'm ready to sell. Okay, fine. Sometimes we'll find out that property owners will have multiple properties and that they're interested in participating in the program. In the second phase, we try and match the information that they've provided us with the economic analysis, the consumer analysis, and the list of prospects that we create. And then in the third phase, if you retain us for it, then there's that ongoing interaction with them. Because as soon as you begin to help them, reach out and try and help them, you're going to create activity, and that's going to build on itself.
So when you talk about, as you did with getting landlords on board, having them sign a letter saying, well, we're interested in being part of the process, we'll pay reasonable rents, etc., that's done in stage one or phase one?
Probably in phase one, it might be formalized. The actual letter might be formalized as part of the strategic plan, yes. Again, if you choose to do that. There's lots of places where we didn't have them sign anything, and they got results and participated. Yes, sir.
On the first page of your letter, and again, I don't know if the public has the benefit of this letter. They don't. Okay. After reviewing downtown Millburn, you write that one of the things that you can assist us with is creating a more visually appealing area to encourage shopping, including improvements to facades, streetscapes, signage, and more, right?
Yes.
So would that include you coming to Millburn, maybe, and I understand you haven't been engaged and you haven't
Right.
done the analysis, but in your experience, would that include coming to the township committee and saying, well, I think the facade should be this, and the sidewalk should be this, and the parking should be that, all those kinds of things to create the environment that you think is more conducive to attracting these retailers?
Yeah, and that's all it is our recommendations for it. The closest example would probably Elizabeth Avenue. They retained us not to recruit at first, but essentially to come in and say, what are the visual obstacles to having economic growth here? And so we went building by building, block by block, and we made a list and we took photographs and we came and we presented it. Some of that fell back on the individual property owner, and the township either had code enforcement talk to them, or they offered grant programs, or in Vineland they did a recoverable grant where they gave people up to $25,000 per storefront And then you paid that back over a certain period of time at zero interest. And I think if you stayed in the property for, I think if you were still there 5 years later or 10 years later, one or the other, then the balance of it was written off. The community can design that any way it wants. In other cases, that can lead to streetscapes. It can lead to lighting issues. It can lead to a thing called SEPPED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. So, raise the tree branches, lower the bushes, those kinds of things. How they get implemented depends really upon what the specific activity is and what the committee's appetite is for that.
Parking often included in that analysis?
We don't do a parking analysis. What we do is a parking perception analysis, and here's my point. It seems to me on the surface that you may have more than enough parking here, but it was a little hard for me to find a parking spot today because the signage isn't that great. So one of the things that we would do in the survey is we would ask a question that says, are you able to find parking when you want it? Or, some variations of those questions. And then we look at the answers based on whether you're a resident or a visitor or an occasional shopper. And what we tend to find is if residents can find parking and visitors can find parking, you probably have enough parking. If residents can find it and visitors can't, you probably have a signage problem. And then we make that recommendation. Again, we're not parking engineers, and we don't profess to be. We're just looking at it from a consumer's perspective.
Thank you.
Committeewoman?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
just have two questions.
Okay.
Can you give us all a concrete example of something you successfully executed in Maplewood, South Orange, or Springfield? Because you mentioned those
Yeah,
are the towns. And my other question is, do your services include, do you ever do pop-up shops or any kind of special event promotion and which stage would that be in?
Right. So let me use South Orange as the example. We worked with Bob Zuckerman there from the Improvement District. Bob had retained us when he was working in an improvement district in New York City. He knew us. He brought us in. What he specifically asked us to do was to do community outreach, do an analysis, and develop a strategic plan. And I would be happy to provide his name and phone number for you. I think it's more relevant coming from him in terms of what he thinks those successes are. In Maplewood, Mayor DeLuca retained us to do an overall analysis. Initially, we were looking at their train station area, and we were also looking at one of their improvement districts along a commercial corridor. They decided not to move forward with the improvement district. We did make recommendations for the train station. There was redevelopment involved where the grocery store was there. And then they later brought us back. There was a fire in a diner. I don't remember the intersection it was on, but it was a fairly well-known diner, and they brought us back to help them recruit somebody from there. And I'm sorry, what was the third one? Springfield.
Yeah.
Springfield called us up and said, we don't know which way is forward. We don't have a clue about anything. It was a newly formed improvement district. We came in and laid out a platform for them to work on. We were not involved in implementation at all there.
And pop-up shops, did you ever?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I generally don't. I think that pop-up shops can be misunderstood sometimes, that they're not really a recruitment vehicle, they're a promotional vehicle. And we have participated in programs in Salem. We worked on a program called the Phantom Art Gallery, where Salem, New Jersey, if you've ever been down there, they have a terrible, well, first off, they have no consumers. It's a really distressed area. And what we did was work with them to hold art galleries in a bunch of vacant stores around the area. And we don't just do this for communities. We've also done this in the shopping mall business. We gave new life, turned the lights on, attracted people down, and made the place look new again, made it look nice again. And that helped to bring attention and activity to the property itself. But again, in that case, there was a fellow by the name of Joe Scarpa, who is a broker down there, and Joe took everything from that point on out. One of the ones that we have had success with that I think is a bit of showing off, but what the heck, I'm standing here, Glassboro, New Jersey. It's a college town. Rowan University sat about a mile from the downtown, and we were called in there. We spent 14 years there and helped them design and implement $350 million worth of redevelopment in the downtown. And during the recession, during that period, we started in 2004, and in 2007/8, when the recession hit, that project continued through. It continues to this day, and in many cases, it was the largest redevelopment project in the state of New Jersey for a period of years.
Thank you.
So I understand that you are willing to take questions from the public. So if the township committee people have no more questions, I would open up the floor just to ask Robert. Wait, what's your first name?
That's my brother, Joe.
Joe, I'm sorry.
I'm Joe.
Sorry, excuse me.
My mother can't tell us apart either, so.
We do that to our kids, right?
It's
They
all
don't like it. So if anyone from the public has any questions, just specific to this,
Okay.
I would ask that you come to the podium and say your name and address and ask away.
Hi, Joe. Josh Scharf, and well, you could have been Robert, but anyway, I too am a baby boomer, and we are dropping dead. In fact, there are people here who wish I did. But anyway,
I'm not sure I'll make it out of here tonight, but let's see.
it's okay. One of, in terms of funding this, and I think Sam was kind of dancing around this, there really should be a public-private partnership on this, and that the property owners in downtown who stand to benefit from this, there's a unbelievable amount of empty storefronts here, stand to benefit from this. They should be paying for it, at least partially, and shouldn't be foisted completely onto the taxpayers. So that's a first thing, and it's not a question, but it's just an observation. We've had work done on downtown, and frankly, it's kind of, after your presentation, I realize it's kind of backwards, because what we really should be coming out with first is a business plan where things should be. Is there a restaurant row? Is the street kind of curve there? Does it turn into a cul-de-sac and make it quainter? As opposed to just plopping along with a physical plan and then trying to cram things in there. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, a guy walks into a bar.
Right, okay.
I mean, that's the whole point, is that for so many years, we could do it that way. But as the economy has shifted and all those changes I talked about, that's what's driving the need for this.
Okay. In terms of stores, in terms of vacancies over here, there are some large locations.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've done shopping malls, you know that traditionally we've always done anchors on
Yep.
2 or 4 ends of it. And then there's a whole bunch of small, inline.
Yep.
And you've seen them. Some of them are doubles, some of them are singles. With a plan like this, and I think if one looks at the business plan first, you'd be able to come up with some sort of idea. And of course, national chains are as rare as hen's teeth at this point. So being able to finance it. So the big question is rents, I believe, are pretty high here in this town. And that's kind of a driver as to who could be here. And a lot of the rents are really driven by high taxes, which starts narrowing
Josh,
down.
I don't want to cut you off. There's a lot of people here. Can we get to a question?
Okay, well, the question is that how many retailers are there? Or we could meet tomorrow, like we always do. Anyway, but
You always do.
How many, the grand universe now of this, how many retailers, roughly, are there 100, 200? That you could think of? You've done this long enough.
Oh no, well, let me give an answer to a question you didn't ask.
Okay,
One of the problems that you have in your downtown is that most of your buildings are 1-story and 2-story, which means the entire all the debt service has to be carried on that one single store, and that's
Right.
a tremendous burden. And whether you have high taxes or low taxes, that situation doesn't help it. As a rule of thumb, we understand that you need about 15 housing units per acre in order to have enough consumers to sustain a downtown. And I mean a walkable kind of downtown. I'll take a wild guess, you guys are at 2,
Yeah.
maybe 1.5. So the question really becomes, if we have a large space, talk about Saks for a minute, because I
Okay.
know it's in the news. If you have a large space that has to be repurposed, does it have to be a retail store? And if it has to be, and if it just absolutely has to be a retail store, that list is gonna get really narrow really quick. The databases that we use, and we use Google as well, because I'm finding that a lot more growth is coming from independent retailers, and part of our trick is to move them from one location to here.
Okay.
And consolidate, take those people who are spread out along all those secondary roads and consolidate them down here.
Okay.
Now you have something. But the databases that we use have 10,000, 12,000
Okay.
retailers, so
So
there's
it's a lot to pull from.
Yeah.
And even daily demand shoppers, like groceries, things like that would bring traffic.
It all depends on, like, I don't know what your downtown is. What your downtown is, and I mean this with all due
it's kind of a
respect,
mess, right?
it's a remnant. It's a
Right.
remnant of something that once existed. So, the towns that we create are entertainment centers, they're restaurant roads,
Okay.
they're college towns. We need to
So
do
you
the
come in with a
analysis to
concept.
kind of figure out what would work,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
go from there.
Fair enough. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Josh.
Is it Josh?
Josh.
He looks just like Roger.
I know, funny.
Our mother is always.
I hope I don't look like Robert.
No, not at all.
Lynn Ranieri, Oakview Terrace. I think I saw, it was a little hard to see from where I was sitting, somewhere that you do follow-up. How far out do you do follow-up? And I'm asking, do you keep statistics on the sorts of results you get when the towns have completed these projects?
No, we don't. I can tell you a few success stories. I can tell you in the South Bronx, we were given an award by the the American Planning Association for the work that we helped to bring in new businesses there. It was like $90 million or something. In Glassboro, it was $350 million worth of redevelopment and recruitment. Our follow-up, as I mentioned, in Glassboro, we went in for a phase 1 and stayed for 14 years. In other places, we slide the finished report across the table and shake hands and walk away. So there's really, in all of the times that we have done this, it varies dramatically. There's a fellow who's no longer in Decatur, Illinois, who said we did a great job in bringing new businesses there, and I forget what town he's in now in Illinois, but we've had a number of those kinds of successes where people say, you know what, we wouldn't have that store there if it wasn't for you. And I want to be candid. This is not about which specific retailer we're bringing to a specific store. What it's about is taking something that doesn't have anybody driving it and creating a program to drive it, and that will eventually begin to feed on itself.
No, I don't want to sound snarky, but
No.
how do you know that what you're proposing is effective? How do we know that we're getting the
Yeah.
value for the dollar?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not snarky. We've been doing this for a long time. We've done it in a lot of places, and we've had a high level of success. And I will be happy, as I mentioned earlier to the mayor, right?
Or Diane.
Sorry, okay. As I mentioned earlier to Diane, that we would be happy to produce for you contact information for Vic DeLuca in Maplewood and Bob Zuckerman in South Orange and Rob Walsh in New York City, and ask them what they think. There is no guarantee. There is no guarantee that we're the smartest guys on the block, but right now you don't have anybody on the block.
Literally.
You know, people will say to us, well, how accurate is your proposal? And my question is often compared to what? So, again, and I hope I'm not being snarky.
Oh, thank you.
It's a great word, thank you.
Please.
This is becoming contagious.
They're all Roberts.
Hi, my name is Richard Footer, 333 and 335 Millburn Avenue. We've done exercises over the years, surveys, marketing, right back to the Atlantic group that started with the Special Improvement District. The information that came back has always been valuable, informative, and certain circumstances enlightening. But the system has always fallen apart, and I've always known where it did. Once you have all that information, there's no buy-in.
Yeah.
But your presentation took it to that step, So I'd like you to tell me what the buy-in is. There was talk about property owners signing off on it or signing a letter or whatever. Now, is that a contractual agreement where they can't go out of the system?
No, no. Here's what we do generally with the community. We say to them that you should work with property owners that want to work in this process.
Mm-hmm.
And if they refuse to work in this process, you shouldn't work with them.
Mm-hmm.
We try and set criteria that we think is reasonable and justified to getting the end result. I showed you an example of the heart of Brooklyn, and it was in the heart of Brooklyn that they, the bid, insisted that these property owners needed to sign up. Now here's the quick story. It was about a $55 a square foot market. That's what all the analysis showed. The property owners came together, we presented it, they objected to it, they said, you don't know what you're doing, you're from Jersey, what do you know? We went back and did it again with their cooperation, and it was a $55 market. One of the property owners insisted it was a $90 market. Over the course of 6 months, we helped them bring 9 new retailers onto that corridor, onto Washington Avenue corridor, and at the end of that 6 months, that guy's building was still unrented, and I bet if you and I got in the car and drove over there tonight, his building's still empty. The trick to this is making it easier for people to say yes, to help them along. There is no guarantee that I'm going to fill every vacancy up and down your storefront. There's no guarantee that I'm going to give brokers information that they're going to go, aha, if I had only known this sooner. What we do is come into an area where everybody's running around like a herd of cats, doing their own thing, or in many cases doing nothing. And we try to encourage them to all work towards a common goal that's supported by reality, that's supported by facts, and that's why each of these components are important. Again,
Okay, but I seem to get a sense that if there's not buy-in from the property owners, that this could go by the same wayside as previous efforts. So,
yeah.
do you think it might be advisable to run at least one seminar or a couple of seminars where all the property owners are invited and any other interested parties to get a sense as to whether this attempt is futile or not?
Here's how we do that. It's the very first thing that we do. That's not true. It's the second thing we do. The first thing we do is talk with the stakeholders in the community, the people who have to make the decision, have to take the heat if we make a bad call.
Okay.
The second thing we do is, after we've defined what the area is, and I should point out that it doesn't have to be Millburn Avenue. It can be all of your commercial corridors if you want it to be. It doesn't matter to us. We just, want to know where we're working. But the first thing that we do in that case is we identify each of the property owners. We send them multiple letters, and on the front of each envelope it says, in reference to 333 Millburn Avenue, Lot X, Block X, Lot Y. And the letter says, we're trying to do these things. We're trying to stimulate economic growth. We need to know if you'd be interested in speaking with us. And we do multiple mailings, because the sad reality is, if you have 100 property owners, 80 of them are not going to do anything. 10 of them are going to resist anything we try to do, and the other
Okay.
10% are going to do anything we ask them to do.
Okay,
Yes.
let's move on. You know what, it's late, we still haven't had regular public comment, so
Yeah.
does that answer your questions?
I have one more.
One more.
Okay, when you were making the presentation, you
Yes.
made mention of, at some point, you would have a list of prospective tenants,
Yes.
and you would have a list of properties, and this would be presented to the township committee. And Mr. Levy asked a very pertinent question about not wanting, or a statement, not wanting to be responsible for showing favoritism and matching up.
Right.
But was it your intent to say that you were going to give a list of businesses that would open in town more for their approval rather than a matchup?
For their approval, for the committee's approval?
Yes.
So every time we get to a decision point, we will speak with whoever the committee designates as our contact and say, this is what we see, this is what we're proposing, tell us if you want to go this direction or a different direction. So the committee, either as a whole or individually, has the ability to approve everything that we do. In terms of sending the prospect list out to the property owners, and to Mr. Levy's point, and to your point, it's not about whether or not you're going to offend someone because they didn't get the list. It's whether or not that property owner is going to take the bait and agree to participate.
That's not what I was.
Okay, you know,
I
I
was
think
hearing.
the first question, we have one more question, and then I think the most important thing is that we get that list from Maplewood, South Orange,
Yes.
like, and see really what they feel, if this was a good move,
Absolutely.
appropriate, and then we can kind of keep moving.
Absolutely.
So, I'm
Hi,
sorry to
Richard Wasserman,
interrupt you.
24 Inverness Court. My question to you is, how often do you come into a town that doesn't have, kind of a SID or a downtown alliance? Our downtown alliance just stopped functioning. So essentially, you would be coming in, basically interacting with somebody that the mayor appoints or the township appoints. Do you have like a large staff to do all this work? I mean, your fees to me seem actually pretty, very reasonable.
Right.
But I mean, are you ready to come in to do all of this work without a committee to work with? I mean, we have the count, our committee to work with, but there's no downtown alliance right now. So you'd be kind of working on your
No, I
own.
understand that. Maplewood didn't have us work through a downtown alliance. We worked directly with the mayor and with she wasn't the business administrator, I apologize, I don't remember her title. That's not uncommon, and I do think that our fees are appropriate from experience for the work that we need to do. It's the implementation fee where it's not a fixed price, it's an hourly fee. So the more you ask us to do, the more hours it's gonna take and the more we're gonna charge you for it, so.
But I mean, is your success normally tied to collaborating with a larger business committee? I mean, when you do this
No.
work, do you normally come in alone, and do you have a large staff to do this work?
At the risk of insulting them, Arthur Avenue, Little Italy, and the Bronx, they had a committee of 9 people. They made me crazy because they couldn't agree on what they wanted to do. And yes, we have sufficient staffing and resources to provide everything that I've said to you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Yes,
Mayor, I just have a quick question.
sure.
Robert Engel, business address is 46 Main Street, residence is 4 Galloway, Edison. I'm wondering, I've heard from quite a few business owners, property owners, I should say, and there seems to be a little problem in the township, and I'm not sure how this could be rectified, or if it even could be rectified, but the approval process and what needs to go to board approval, 4 months, landlords aren't willing to wait empty for 4 months. There's a cost to an application, and then you have to give a few months free rent to attract a decent tenant. So that's one problem that I've heard repetitively. I'm just wondering if you have any insight into that. And number two, I looked at your website today extensively, and you mentioned the town of Metuchen. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I am a lot more familiar with Metuchen. I grew up right down the block, right very close to it in Edison. And I'm just wondering what you did in Metuchen and when.
There's a large bank there. It was probably 5 years ago, and the first time was probably 2 or 3 years before that. And they asked us to come in and do a series of seminars to educate their elected officials and their appointed officials, and that was our role there. To come in and tell them how this process works and to give them a series of seminars in the hopes that they might want to go off and do it on their own or hire us. But they did not hire us to do that process.
So a lesser task.
Yeah, and they run, all over the place. I'm sorry, your other question was about the property owners who say that there might be a business obstacle. In the first phase of this, we need to go out and talk to people and find out where the opportunities are and where the challenges and the obstacles are. And if there are obstacles or opportunities, we're going to come back and report those to whomever our contact is. We will make specific recommendations, but we have had communities who chose to ignore that. And we've had Roselle as an example that I mentioned right now, where we're working with them to proactively change their approval process to something that's palatable to them and that we can go out and sell to developers as well.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. So, okay, so if you would get us that list, that would be a good next starting point for us. And thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. Sorry to
Okay.
eat up your whole meeting.
Okay. Public comment, right? Do I have to read it again? Okay, so now we're going to be open to general public comment, items not on the consent agenda. So if you come up to the podium, try to keep it as brief as you can because you see it's getting late. We want to hear everybody. So feel free to step up to the podium. Bill? I know.
Phil Kirsch, 93 Cedar Street. Actually, my questions do have something to do with the gentleman who was here, but I can just get them out there. You may know this already, but I was going to ask him if you were going to work with him specifically, or if not, and to what extent he would be involved personally, or would be somebody else on his staff. Because I know often the person who makes the presentation is very well informed and very impressive, and it's important, like if you're having surgery, like who's going to operate.
I guess we'd have to find that out when we get his list of the communities he's worked with, and we will ask them.
Yeah, I know you could ask him, and
Yeah.
another thing you might ask him, unless was over time, it seemed to me that no one has had the time or maybe the resources to keep some kind of a database of our downtown, how many locations we have in the downtown, what percentage are actually occupied, unless we have that.
Yeah, the DMDA has that, had a comprehensive list, to the best, right, Nancy? I think there is, right, the landlords.
So we could check on
Right,
what
we'll check on
our
that.
vacancy
Yeah.
rate
If
is now.
If they had it, we got all of their records, we should be able to find that.
Because in the past, when I've asked, nobody seemed to know. But if you have, even now, if you have their vacancy rate as of when they were in, DMDA was in business as an organization, you can compare that to what happens even like after you get somebody like this involved, to see the rate
Well,
of
yeah.
success, have something to go
But
by.
we'd have to have proof if we decide to
You
go
have to
that
have a
route.
benchmark.
Yeah.
Good.
And the last thing is, I was wondering as I was listening to who their organization would work with, and we don't have a DMDA. What about the Chamber of Commerce? It seemed to me they'd be logical people to be involved with the businesses in the downtown. Is there a reason why they wouldn't be, or misconstrued?
We haven't even got to that. I mean, clearly, if we had a DMDA and the property owners were paying that tax, this would be maybe even a no-brainer. They'd be paying that to fill up their property. So it's a lot of things we have to consider. We just can't go out and do this. There's a
Right,
lot to take into
so the
it.
Chamber of Commerce could be involved, depends how you set it up?
I don't know. They're a for-profit. It's not, people have to join the chamber. So I don't know how that would interact. That's something we could also ask.
And they're a private for-profit
They're
organization?
private for-profit. Each
Yeah.
store has to join.
Yeah.
A company, a person, an entity, yeah.
And they're part of a huge national organization that lobbies.
Because I think they had their lobbying
Huge.
in Washington last week.
Very, very political.
Huge, whole day, lobbying day.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Open public comment on anything not on the consent agenda. Janet?
Janet Pizar, 186 Main Street, here in Millburn. I'm going to reference the meeting 2 weeks ago when it was brought out how many key constituencies are not represented on your panel for the pedestrian and
Janet,
circular
I
traffic.
don't want to interrupt you, but we have something on the resolution tonight that will address and will take into account, I believe. I don't want to assume what you're saying, but
Can I just say it
Sure.
quickly? Okay, so will there be a modification to your roster to address all the exclusions?
no, there will be a brand-new resolution policy going on in effect tonight that will, I believe, address, if you'll just let us get to
Actually,
that.
I've looked it over. I've read it over, but the question still exists.
No, right now, that PACS committee is not changing. It's a reasonable number of people. There are people from different parts of Short Hills, different parts of Millburn, Someone from the planning committee, yeah.
Actually, I wasn't here when it was announced, who are on that panel. So can you please review and tell us how many are business owners, how many are affiliated with the
I
school
don't have it in front of me,
system?
but I can tell you.
How-
There's somebody from the planning board who lives in the Wyoming section. There's one person from the South Mountain section. There's a property owner from Squirrel and the Bee who happens to live in Upper Short Hills. There is Jackie who lives in Deerfield section. There is Andrew Morgan who owns the deli, does not live in town but represents downtown. There is Bobby Angle who is the property manager for the downtown corner, Blue Mercury. Who else is on there? Who am I leaving out?
I have a list right here.
Oh, do you have the list, Marilyn? Thank you. Marilee is on the committee. Oh, you give it to me to read? Okay. Thank you. Okay. I live in South Mountain section. Jackie lives in Deerfield section. Gaston from the planning board lives in the Wyoming section. Rich Keller lives in the upper Wyoming section, a different area of town, and he is an engineer who's done consulting all throughout Millburn for many years. Bobby Angle, Andrew Morgan, and then we have the police chief, the fire chief, the DPW director, who has grown up in Millburn, lived here forever, still lives here. Paul Phillips is our township planner, who probably knows this town intimately, and our traffic engineer, who is downstairs, Christine Bugle. Right now, it is a very manageable group of people who have different ideas, who bring something to the table in a different perspective. And right now, we are laser focusing on what was left incomplete from the complete streets, which has affected downtown, circulation problems, and there are still some safety glitches that have to be addressed. Okay,
So
thank
the
you.
answer is no.
But very well stated.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mazur.
A very quick question first. I have some comments to make on the sign ordinance. Do you want those comments now or after you introduce it for a first read?
It's the second read, it's gonna be voted on tonight.
He wants to make one.
Oh, so go ahead, now would be the appropriate time.
All right. This is realistically not the most important
But can I
item.
just say, this is just for real estate signs tonight,
Absolutely.
specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not the most important item that the town is going to address, certainly tonight. It's a quality of life issue. As I mentioned at the previous meeting, 30 years ago, the consensus of the people that were on this board and the planning board was that signage should be limited. And there's a complete prohibition on trailblazer signs in residential areas. Clearly, even though we have a complete prohibition, there's a proliferation of the signs. There has been no enforcement of the trailblazer signs. I did an Oprah request of the code enforcement officer for the last 5 years. There was absolutely no enforcement actions. I asked for similar information from the Millburn Police, and they couldn't come up with a single item. So going forward, we should be looking at this. It's being honored in the briefs. There are some real estate agents who are basically ignoring our ordinances. There may be others that are saying, I'm not going to do it. Real estate is a very competitive area. We should have a level field where everybody is treated the same. The arguments for changing it at the last meeting were that people coming in with New York tags have difficulty finding the properties. My 12-year-old granddaughter has Waze on her cell phone, and I think most people do. So I think it's not a genuine argument as to why we need to change, but certainly we should be looking at it as with anything that's 30 years old.
Like that sandwich board, what you see the realtors put out, but this is gonna give us the tools to enforce
All
that.
right.
That's exactly the point.
what I would suggest, I think that there's certainly an attitude with if I could be so presumptuous as to put myself in a position of the Millburn Police, is that they look on this as a zoning matter and not anything that they're willingly going to do. What I would suggest to you, you've got all of these things. You change it from 2 signs to 4 signs. And I think most of the real estate agents are going to put up as many signs as they want. The Millburn Police are not enforcing it. When there's 1 sign and it would lead them directly to the house, nothing has been done for 5 years. Certainly, they are not going to be going around, for example, the South Mountain area and counting signs.
But if they leave the signs up past 6 o'clock, they will risk forfeiting their signs and getting a fine.
They take the signs down. I mean, they're not leaving them up. But look, the point of the matter is, you should do something. Say what you mean and mean what you say. And what I would suggest, I think if you want to have the signs, then I would not put a lot of conditions on it. I wouldn't put these 4, limited to 4, because you're not going to be, you're kidding yourself if you're going to enforce that. You're not going to get the enforcement. And you put the limitation, there should be no balloons on it. There was a real estate agent behind me, and she mumbled to herself, "Oh, we need the balloons." So, look, you have to decide. What I would suggest, Madam Mayor, is that you survey the civic associations, see what they want, and also sit down with the chief of police and see what the enforcement mechanism is going to be.
Okay.
While I'm up here on the sign ordinance, you're out for bid for an electronic sign by the library. The bid specs on that are that it should be capable of moving graphics. Your sign ordinance specifically prohibits signs with moving graphics. So,
Yeah, we're exempt as a municipality, so.
all right, you may want to,
Sorry, but I hear you.
at the same point, for clarification, you may want to put in the ordinance the specific exemption of it so that people don't start putting up their own signs. This is a quality of life issue. Again, I'd like to just ask you, the 7-Eleven and hours of operation of stores, I'd like to see something done. I know that's going to be a complicated issue, but we're dealing with the time of application on this. If 7-Eleven comes back in and files an application, it may limit what we can do.
It's being addressed
All right.
tonight, promise.
Thank
Stick
you.
around. Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
Hi, Donna Bernstein, 900 Ridgewood Road. It recently came to my attention that you're considering making an ordinance to prohibit Airbnb in town. And I just wanted to let you know that my husband and I have been Airbnb hosts for about 5 years now. It's been a wonderful experience all around. We've made a lot of friends. It's all, people just like you and I that come and stay with us. When we first started doing it, we thought, who's going to come to Millburn? It's not a vacation spot. But it's grandparents that are coming to visit their grandkids and children, and their children don't have space in their house to host them. So they love the opportunity to be able to, be just a mile up the road or walking distance to their children, rather than having to stay at the Hilton or a hotel on Route 10. We get a lot of people who are visiting family and have a B'nai Mitzvah at B'nai Israel. So again, they welcome the opportunity to be able to walk. We're walking distance to B'nai Israel. There would be no other place for them to stay if they needed to be able to walk to synagogue. We've gotten people from all over the world. We have someone coming actually next week from France who works at the pharmaceutical company down on Willow Street. It's all upper middle class people that we get. We've made friends. We've had people that are coming because they're moving to town and they want to look for a place to live. They end up moving into town. We've made friends. it's only been a wonderful experience for us, and I would just, plead you to reconsider the ordinance and possibly look into some sensible regulations, so rather than just, not having an ordinance, but creating some kind of an ordinance where there'll be some sort of regulations to prohibit the problems that you may have seen in terms of noise or garbage or whatever it may be.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are you always home when you have your B&B
Yeah, so
guests?
we are always home. We rent out our guest room. It's 1 bedroom. We have a maximum of 2 people in our home at any given time. It's very rare. We don't do it a lot, but it's a really nice supplemental income as we're empty nesters. It helps us subsidize our large rent now that we really, honestly don't need to stay in Millburn since we don't have kids in the system anymore. And it's just been a wonderful experience all around, so we really enjoy it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak to the Airbnb? Please.
Now I'm thinking about it. I'm only kidding.
Hi, Ed Bernstein, 900 Ridgewood Road. That was just my wife who spoke.
Not just your wife, your wife.
Did I
You said
say?
just my wife. No, kidding. Go ahead. Sorry.
Just.
Right.
I meant that she spoke previously.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Yeah, so we've been, like my wife said, we've been doing Airbnb for about 5 years now. And we've had nothing but positive experiences. Again, it's just a 1 bedroom that we're posting on Airbnb. The people, we have never had a bad experience. And I want to make sure that you understand how Airbnb works, because I don't think it's just a matter of luck that we've just had only good experiences. When a person goes onto Airbnb, they and they go to a place to stay, the person, the owners of the place where they stay rate them, and likewise, the rating happens the other way around. The person who stayed in a particular location gets to rate where they stayed. And when a person wants to rent an Airbnb location, we get to see that person's ratings before we accept them. So, of course, we wouldn't accept someone who didn't have less than a stellar reputation on Airbnb. Even more so because we'll be in the house with them. Just to make the joke that we're not going to have someone who's an admitted axe murderer stay in our house. Now, also, Airbnb has some postings that literally for $35 you can stay on somebody's couch. But that's not the type of situation that we have here. And when a person's coming and they're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars to stay 1 night in a particular location, they're not the type of people that are going to be burglars or any type of felons in any way. So I'm just trying to make the point that these aren't the kinds of people that you have to worry about in our town.
So, in response to yours and Donna was the first email we got,
Mhm.
And we've gotten several others since. And, we've always been accused of being reactive, not proactive. So there were several towns that are similar to Millburn Township who did put these ordinances into effect to ban Airbnbs. And we thought, okay, this is something that would be good for the town. We see that maybe there's people who do Airbnbs, so we are going to not put this on the agenda for the next meeting. We are going to take a pause. We're going to start gathering more data. We're going to look into more facts, maybe see if there's other people from the other side who did complain about a few Airbnbs in town. And we are going to right now table this, and because you gave us the first email, and it was very informative, things we weren't aware of. And I said we've received maybe 5 since. So we thank you, because, we have to see that we're going in the right direction. And, yeah, so we were trying to be a little proactive on something that maybe we didn't have enough information on, so now we are gonna gather more facts.
Great.
So it's gonna be off the agenda at the next meeting.
Okay.
So thank you for reaching out to us, folks.
Thank you.
It has a good week, okay? Thanks. It's been tabled, right? It's
Can I just make one point?
about Airbnb? Sure.
Just want to get permission. Lisa Janowski, Singer, 325 Wyoming in Millburn. I was thinking about the Airbnb and things that, from serving on the planning board, serving on environmental commission, I was thinking we have ordinances for sound, we have ordinances for nuisance, right? We have property maintenance. We have all these that we can enforce. And in some respects, Airbnb, every place I've stayed at Airbnb, I'm not a host. I've always stayed in places where the host, so to speak, has been present. So I haven't experienced, so to speak, an empty house or full house rental. And I was thinking about it because we have long-term rentals in town. And we talk about the ability to age in place and everything that we have in terms of property taxes, the expense of living in New Jersey, won't even just say Millburn, but every place. And in some respects, you think about it, we want to keep our elderly in place. What's to prevent a senior citizen from hosting, let's say, a college student during the time that they're in a semester-long period? So, in a sense, I think we have to look at it from a leasing standpoint, long and short term, and not just kind of say Airbnb or bookings or any of the other competitor, I'll say, entities that they do. Because in a sense, I don't feel like the township should regulate what I can do with my house unless I'm doing something that is offensive to my neighbors, but then I should have a neighborly conversation.
Well, you know,
So
part
I'm
of our-
just, just my observations.
Part of our job is to take the
Right.
safety and the community into
Absolutely.
effect, and this was something that we thought was in the right direction, so let us study it.
Absolutely.
And
That's the
hear
only
from-
reason I was bringing these points up.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Just a point of clarification, that ordinance will have to be on the next agenda.
Oh.
It'll just have to be tabled
Oh,
by
tabled
action
in
of the
2
committee.
weeks, okay, so I believe everyone's in agreement to table that at the next meeting. Yeah, I spoke to people.
Thank you. Yes, we, Bernadette, yeah.
So, thank you for that, sharing that you will table the discussion, which means, does that mean that we would have time to meet with you, and give you further background? Or does it mean there just will be another discussion at the next meeting and not a
No,
vote?
Just keep emailing. If you have people who are pro Airbnb, they should email us. And if there's people who are watching on camera who will see this meeting another time, who have a reason why they think we should chase after the ordinance, we're gonna gather more facts from the company that has an algorithm that captures how many Airbnbs are going on at a certain time in the community.
Great, okay, I would just still like to make a few
Oh, wait, your
comments.
name and address is
Yeah,
right.
sorry. So I'm Bernadine Wu, I'm at 40 Highland Avenue, and I'm a proud 20-year active resident. I consider myself a steward of what's known as Montview, and for 15 years have worked very closely with the town and the historic preservation. I say this because I care about this town. I have invested millions of dollars in renovating and investing in this town, including buying what I call winning the booby prize, which is the property next to me, just to prevent the building of some more McMansions. So I am appealing for a collaborative and fair and due process approach to this short-term rental. I know that the committee has done some research. It sounds like the research has been done on the hosts. It does not sound like you have research on demand as well as the guests, and we actually have that data, and that's something that we could possibly work together with. I also know that Airbnb has policy representatives that has called this town, and those calls have gone unanswered. It might be good to get their data and work with them collaboratively, and I know that Airbnb is just one of the several short-term rentals. Like others, I support my neighbor's choice to have short-term rentals. I think that is their right as homeowners, and I have not had a problem, and I liken it to our use of Uber. To get rides, to sell our stuff on Facebook and Craigslist, or to give our stuff away on WorkMom. So just in principle, I have sort of a view on that. I am a single mother of 2 high school students. When I got divorced 5 years ago, Airbnb really helped us stay in this town. And I think like the empty nesters, there's a valid consideration for the needs. We do pay a significant amount of taxes. I now pay taxes on 2 properties. And I agree that there's a misperception about the kinds of guests that are here as Airbnb. And I would argue that many of us and many of the complaints that are probably coming from people are folks that actually use Airbnb as well. So facts. The ages of our guests are between 40 and 70 years old. According to Airbnb statistics in our county, group size is between 2 and 3 people. So it's not party houses. It's not major guests. It's 85% of rentals are for a homeowner that is not, is a homeowner and is also not creating, buying properties and just doing short-term rentals. These are many of the statistics that I think that we could use together in order to create great legislation. So we absolutely are for the safety of our community. I would not put my children, myself, my house at risk in having people over. I think there is a false narrative around what is happening. A committee member shared with me that there was even a burglary related to an Airbnb, and I know for a fact that that is my neighbor falsely accusing me of causing a burglary at her house. This neighbor, Rosemary Becky, is a Republican lobbyist. She's very good at what she does, and she has been calling the town with complaints over and over. And she has stated that, we had an NFL party, or
We shouldn't say anyone's name in the public.
That's fine. She has said my name in public records. So.
Okay.
But the point is, like, let's get to the facts, right? Let's.
So if you would send us everything,
so
I could meet with you.
Oh, that'd be great.
Anybody else? Right.
Do you have a registry of complaints, and do you have,
We're researching that. I don't.
Okay.
We asked.
So that's another thing that we would ask for, for public sharing, especially around, investigated complaints. So what I have sent the committee is 3 examples of other townships, including Westfield, and I have copies of Westfield here, which have ordinances that have regulated short-term rentals, which seems to be a sensible approach with a balance between home ownership rights as well as their ability to address key potential issues. A lot of these potential key issues, traffic, parking, trash, noise, I'm really confident that our town already has these rules and have come into play when my son has a 8th grade graduation party or the Rackets Club has a lot of noise. So I also think we should depend on our current regulations and police procedures as well, and not create regulation for when there isn't as well of an issue. So in conclusion, I'm sorry, one more statistic is that there are a lot of hosts that are over 60 years old. So again, looking for those statistics. So again, encourage not an all or nothing approach. It sounds like you are open to that.
Absolutely.
And that over the course of between now and the March 19th meeting, does it make sense for us to share data with each other and
for sure
discuss this? Okay. I only say this because I literally flew in on a red-eye just to make this meeting, and I'm not sure that I can make the next meeting. But I offer myself up, and as well as the Airbnb representatives, I can put you in touch with them, as well as the data that we collect, where we know more about our guests than anybody here. I know more about the people that walk into my house than anybody in this room, than a person that walks into Boxcar, than a person that walks into the town hall, or the post office, or any restaurant here. So I'd like to share that with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for making the meeting tonight.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Lynn Ranieri, I just want to give you this piece of paper. My son and I have been having a discussion about Airbnbs in his town, Traverse City, Michigan, and he said that Traverse City set out some regulations in their ordinance to allow them. So I just, things as an example, that the host has to be on site, and if they can't, there has to be a designated other person, limited to no more than 2 rooms to 2 adults per room. And the seasons would be capped at 84 guest nights a year. 4 people staying 1 night equals 4 guest nights. So I just wanted to give you this.
Okay, I'll give it to Christine, and she will send it out to each of us. Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, on with the meeting. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
John
Please, I'm
Westfolk,
sorry.
long 45 Mechanic. I promise actually not to read my long speech. I'll just pass that out because I really appreciate the time that the deputy mayor has taken to listen to us, and I'm assuming that you will be tabling it. A lot of us came especially for this meeting, and I don't know if I'll be able to make another meeting just because I have to go to my own mirror meetings that you all go to. But I'll pass this out and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. The committee will now consider consent agenda resolutions, including Resolution 19080, which appoints an alternate two-member to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. The resolutions listed on the consent agenda for consideration are as follows. 072 bills list, 073 authorized refund of tax overpayments, 074 authorized refund of redemption money to outside lien holder, 075 authorized rescind of tax refund, 076, we're revising the name of the Cultural Diversity and Arts Committee to the Advisory Committee on Culture, Engagement, Diversity, and Arts. There was a conflict with another committee in town, and we don't want to, there was no reason, the missions are different, and this solves that problem. 077 is approval of raffle licenses. 078, approved closed session immediately following regular meeting for personnel and contract negotiations. One more RFP we're looking at, and contracts and pending litigation for 85 Woodland Road mediation. And I think that's it, right? 080. Yeah, appointment to the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Move the consent agenda
May I have a
items.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Are there any comments from the committee?
Roll call. I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Oh, roll call.
vote.
It's a roll call.
Ms. Burstein?
Yes.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Purvis?
Yes.
Mayor Phil Eglo?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any comments from the committee on the agenda, on the consent agenda items only? Okay. So we're good, right?
We just approved it.
I approve.
We already approved it.
All right, they're approved.
The
Okay.
ad hominem comments.
Bum, ba, bum, bum. What next?
Make some.
079. Okay, so this is the new adoption of traffic issues management policy. Copy of it. So this is something we've been working on actually for quite a few months. It's pretty comprehensive, it's very complex. This will answer anybody who has specific traffic and safety concerns in their neighborhood or specific area in town. Are there copies of that on there, or would it be online after we approve it?
It'll be online.
It'll be online. I'll give you an example. If there's somebody who wanted a stop sign at an intersection near their house, it won't, it doesn't really, it's not as effective to have one person say, I want a stop sign, or I want a speed bump, or I have an issue here. The idea would be to go to a number of residents who all have buy-in and have an issue at this particular area to sign on. It will then come to our traffic department. It will be evaluated. If deemed appropriate, it will be sent to our engineer, and it'll go through the proper steps and procedures to see if this is something that we need to look at for the town. I believe this is much more effective than a committee, because a committee wouldn't have a starting point. This is very specific to the people who know their areas and their neighborhoods best, who will be able to address that and bring it to our attention. And do you want to add anything to that, Alex? We'll have a copy of
No,
it.
I think it's
Yeah.
just it's an effective way and tool for us to add some efficiency and not get sort of bogged down by necessarily one individual requester for a particular issue. That helps us make sure that the issue that we're looking to address is effective for the entire neighborhood.
Right, and it's very comprehensive. It will be on the website. There will be procedures that will be filled out. There will be procedures from town hall to address these areas. So, motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Burstein?
Yes.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Liebenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Prupus?
Yes.
Mayor Eglo?
Yes. Committeewoman Prupus, you are scheduled to sponsor ordinance 2526-19.
Procedure for introducing an ordinance on first reading. I would like to present an ordinance entitled Township of Millburn, ordinance number 252619. An ordinance of the Township of Millburn, County of Essex, State of New Jersey, amending the general licensing ordinance of the Township of Millburn concerning canvassers and solicitors. Statement of purpose. The purpose of this ordinance is to enact a comprehensive revision of the township's door-to-door canvassing and solicitation regulations, and to bring them into conformance with controlling constitutional case law. I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with the law in the item, and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, March 19th, 2019.
Second.
Roll call. Ms. Burstein?
Yes.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Liebenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Prupus?
Yes.
Mayor Eglo?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Levy?
Thank you, Mayor. Ordinance 252719 to amend and supplement Article 6 of Developmental Regulations and Zoning Ordinance of Millburn to allow temporary real estate directional signs for during use of an open house. The purpose of the ordinance is to allow for and establish guidelines for the use of real estate directional or trailblazing signs for open houses. There's been some discussion on this. Section 5E is amended to include that the directional signs can be no larger than 18 inches in height, 24 inches in width, and no higher than 30 inches. They must be placed in a public right-of-way, not on private property, between the hours of 11 and 5, removed by 6 p.m. No more than 4 temporary real estate directional signs shall be used, and they should not have affixed to them balloons, streamers, or other decorative accessories, whatever that means. I move that this, that was my editorial, that was not in the ordinance. I move that the ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with law on the item, if anyone still reads it, and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, March 19, 2019.
Second.
Roll call. Ms. Burstein?
No, I think there are too many issues. I think Mr. Mazur's raised some real good issues, and I don't think it's right for decision.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Liebenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Prupus?
Yes.
Mayor Eglo?
Yes. Okay. I am sponsoring and reading ordinance 25-28-19. I would like to present an ordinance entitled Township of Millburn, Ordinance Amending and Supplementing the Township of Millburn Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance. Statement of purpose. Analysis of existing development within the township's OR2 zone concentrated at the east end of Millburn Avenue revealed that the district contains principally office uses, including medical offices, together with a number of retail, personal service uses. Neither retail sales establishments nor eating and drinking establishments currently exist in the district. While the built condition largely conforms to the current OR2 zone standards with regard to use, the subject amendment accomplishes the following objectives. It expressly allows for medical offices, which is not presently the case, and in recognition of the fact that the OR2 zone is in close proximity to established residential uses and zones, it expands upon and reinforces the definition of retail services, rendering it clear that retail service use shall not include establishments primarily engaged in the sale of products or merchandise, including food or drink to the general public. And this came about because some time ago, it came to our attention that the New Jersey Energy was looking to put a 7-Eleven there. Their application was denied, and this gave us the opportunity, they withdrew their application, and this gave us the time to work on something that we have been talking about since last year, and I know we spoke about this at the Environmental Commission, to define this area to not allow for food and drink sales. correct? Okay. I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with the law in the item, and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, March 19th, 2019. May I have a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Bursey?
Yes.
Mr. Levy?
No.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Prupus?
Yes.
Mayor Ego?
Yes. Does any committee member have an item of old business to address? Does any committee member have an item of new business they would like to bring out tonight? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Move to adjourn.
May I have a second?
Second.
Yeah, we have
All
closed
right,
session.
we have closed session, so good night, everybody, thank you for coming.